We've all been invited here as guests of Rabbi Kaczynski, standing to my immediate right. To apologize for some of the logistics. As all of you know, this was a rather ad hoc affair. It's been pulled together literally in the last hours. We had an intervening Shabbat, so nothing could be done from Friday night till Saturday night. So we will appreciate everyone's patience. I'd like to thank Rabbi Kaczynski and his Rebbetzin for opening up the Chabad House to this important event. We didn't have an opportunity to print out an agenda, so I will lay it out now. I will have a few words of wisdom, and then I will introduce Jeff Wiesenfeld, who will have the privilege of introducing Mr. Buckley to say a few words before we bring Pamela Geller to come and speak. You're at a base Chabad. This room serves as a house of worship, as a synagogue, but as you all know, in the Jewish world, everyone can hear me. In the Jewish world, the synagogue immediately becomes, following prayer, a beis midrash, a place of learning. Midrash, a place of learning, ultimately means speech. In Chassidut, we know that there are three important vessels to the soul of the individual, a soul that we all have. Those three important vessels are machshava, thought, dibur, speech, and ma'aseh, action. We say in Chabad Hasidus, ha'ikar hu ha'maaseh. The principal matter is what you do. Having said that, however, we know that dibur, or speech, are holy vessels. There will not be a word out of anyone's mouth that is not a vessel for holiness or its opposite, God forbid. It is a vessel. So it is important that as we gather here this morning to speak and to exercise our God-given right to speech and our American right to free speech, that we do so civilly, we do so with courteousness, and we do so with mental type. Before we go any further, it is incumbent on all of us to say the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag will ask everyone to please rise and follow after me. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without any further ado, I'd like to ask Jeff Wiesenfeld to come and introduce Mr. Buckley. As many of you know, Jeff Wiesenfeld has been involved in communal affairs, politically, religiously, professionally. He was involved in the initial invitation from Great Neck Synagogue to invite Ms. Geller to come speak to us in the community. He's been intimately involved in the follow-up Plan B, and we're honored to have him here with us today.
I'd like firstly to ask all of you, ad hoc, but also ad hoc expense,
and for really rescuing our community from a feeling of tension, of stifling, to express our views and our concerns. I ask that you all lend physical, monetary support to Chabad at the conclusion. I would like to recognize publicly again my respect and deep affection for my rabbi at Great Neck Synagogue, who endured a tremendously difficult decision-making process and did the best he could. And let me tell you that in Great Neck Synagogue, most of us understand these issues must be discussed, and I praise Rabbi Polakov. At the risk of leaving people out, I want to recognize some great writers, community leaders, authors, Rabbi David Al-Ghazi of Forest Hills, Queens, Pastor Manning, all of the volunteers who did so much to make this possible on such short notice, literally 24 hours notice, because nothing could have been done on the Shabbat. And of course, Charles Jacobs and Andrew Boston and Robert Spencer. And a guy who worked behind the scenes and pretty resourceful, more so than I've thought in the past, Dr. Paul Brody. Let me just say very briefly, my father was a Jew, my mother was a Jew, I am a Jew. Last words of Daniel Pearl as he was beheaded by Muslim terrorists. These were the holy words of Daniel Pearl, enunciated on the tombstone of my late mentor, Edward I. Koch. And Ed Koch was one of the few people who could raise a question, a message, without being assaulted, as so many public officials and those of us in civilian life are assaulted for doing so. We don't attack a faith. We attack a terribly dangerous minority within a faith that unfortunately that faith has not seen fit to sufficiently address. And we must address it. And that's really what this is all about. We must support the Herset Alis, the Raymond Ibrahims, the Amir Taharis, the Zudi Jassers, the Khalid Muntasers, the Khalid Abu Tumes, and all of these moderate Muslims who speak out but have no support in their community. And we cannot have dialogue as we would have amongst friends, because if we're friends, we speak candidly to each other and honestly to each other. And having dialogues with nice people who discuss their cultures and their traditions with each other here in our own community with connections in Westbury, where in the Westbury location, you have people who have claimed that Israel and the Central Intelligence Agency were responsible for 9/11 and have supporters of Hamas. This is not real friendship. We want you to stand up against those of your brethren who are extremists. That's what today is about. So without further ado, what I want to do is I don't want to tell you the story that I've internalized about Lance Corporal Greg Buckley. I want his father to tell you in his own words, who was Greg Buckley? What did the people that he trained to be policemen in Afghanistan do to him? What was done to 102 Marines and soldiers of ours, American soldiers, in similar fashion, not to mention the many thousands of lives that we have given to ungrateful governments who have other designs, and in terms of the entire Levant and beyond, radical Muslim brotherhoods continue to take power. The Brotherhood, which has a continuum which started in 1929, as you know, almost a century ago with Sayyid Qutb, and has worked its way through Haj Amin al-Husseini, the Mufti of Jerusalem, who conspired with Hitler to murder all the Jews of Palestine when the Nazis would have reached Palestine, all the way to Jimmy Carter's negligence with the Shah and bringing us the great Islamic Revolution, which began with Khomeini, and of course today to Morsi and the entire so-called Arab horrific spring. We have to understand. And so, tell us the story, please, Greg, of your son and what it means for us.
down to speaking about my son, it's difficult. It's been, so just bear with me. It's been 8 months. The worst time of my life. My son, like all other parents say that their son was the best. My son wasn't the best. He was the greatest. Greatest kid you could ever know. As a little boy, I remember it like it was yesterday. He was 5 years old. He was getting dressed to go to kindergarten. His mom and myself helped him get his clothes together, and he packed up his own little books and put it in his backpack, and was so proud to go to kindergarten for the first time. And he walked down the corner of the block. He was so excited looking up and down the block for the bus, so he can begin his life. That bus came around the corner. My son was jumping up and down, so happy to get on that bus and start his life. And I said, "Are you okay, son?" He said, "I'm good, Dad." He jumped on that bus like a man. And then he turned around and he looked at me. And he said, "Dad, are you going to be there when I come home?" I said, "Son, I'll be there for you forever. I'll always be by your side." And he laughed, and he got on that bus, and that's where it began. He went through school as a great kid, never got in trouble. And 9/11 happened, and I was at work on Flatbush Avenue, and I seen the buildings being hit. So me and my brother and another couple of guys jumped in my truck and went into the city. Everybody else was coming out of the city, covered in white. We decided we're going to go in, and everybody was like, "Where are you going?" "Everybody's leaving the city." I said, "That's not what a real American does." So me and my brother, and a couple of my guys drove right into the city over the bridge, and we went right down to ground zero, and it was chaos. People dying all over the place. And we decided to stay there for 2 days, and my son was worried to death about where I was. There was no signal. We couldn't talk to my kids. But I knew I was doing the right thing for my kids and for the other Americans. That's the problem. There's not enough people in America standing up. If we all stood up and did the right thing, the world would be a better place for all of us. I'm not a professional speaker by no means, but what I am is I'm a true American, and I speak from my heart. I don't write anything down, I just tell it the way it is. You have to understand there's so much hatred in this world. My son lost his life because of hatred. It all has to come to an end. It has to come to an end. It's true. It has to come to an end now. We can't let our government tell us that it's going to go to the end of 2013, 2014, then it's going to go to 2015. Our government needs to listen to us. We elected him to be our president. Was it a good choice? I don't think so. You know, Ronald Reagan, years ago, Ronald Reagan years ago ruled this country with an iron fist. Gaddafi was giving us a problem. What did we do? We went right over there and we shut him up immediately. We never heard about him anymore. Okay? This is what you need to do. When you're being attacked by terrorists, you need to take care of it and address it immediately. You don't need to put them up in a hotel like they are over in Cuba, locked up for 9 years, while parents are suffering. We know they did this. We need swift justice. When you commit a terrorist act against an American, you need to be prosecuted and prosecuted immediately. You don't need to be sitting don't need to be sitting inside of a jail for 9 years, being able to pray, being able to turn around and have 3 meals a day and a nice warm bed. Well, there are thousands and thousands of Americans that were murdered on 9/11. Nobody wants to think about those family members that are suffering every single day because those guys are not being prosecuted. My son, Lance Corporal Greg Buckley, was the type of kid that always wanted to do the right thing. And when he was 14, he said, "Dad, I want to join the military. I'm going to join the Marine Corps and do the right thing for this country." At first, I was dead against it. Winds up, as my son is, he convinced me over and over again this is what he wants to do. So he winded up going over to the Marine Corps with the understanding that he was going to have a civilian job and work over there. And he was only 17 years old. He left right after high school. A couple of months after high school, he left. When he got there, he had a civilian job. He was stationed in Hawaii. He had a great life over there. Came home last year on my birthday. I was 48 years of age. And he sat down at the dinner table. And as crazy as this is, that picture right here was the last time I got to see my son on my birthday. We sat down at the table. We had about 45 people there. Nice, quiet night. And he told me that he's going back to Afghanistan. He's going to go back to Hawaii and then leave to Afghanistan in 2 weeks. And I was extremely upset about that. And I asked him, "Why would you do this? What's going on?" He says, "No, they're making me go. I don't have a choice." I was beside myself. I tried to make phone calls to see what was going on, but nobody would ever answer me. My son went there, got over to Afghanistan at the end of April, turned around and called me later in May and said, "Dad, I'm here, everything's okay. I don't know what they're going to do, they're going to station me." Well, I didn't hear from him for a week, and then he called me, and I couldn't barely understand what he was saying to me on the phone because it was all broken up, and he said, "Dad, I'm not in a good place." Now, the time difference over there, it was the middle of the night for me. I woke up, it was 2:30 in the morning. He says, "I'm not in a good place." He says, "I shouldn't be here." It was like, I don't understand. He goes, "They put me somewhere, but I feel like I am in hell." He goes, "These people don't want me here. I'm trying to help them, do the right thing by them, and they don't want us here." I had an altercation with a gentleman last night when I was on guard duty, and he told me, "We don't want you here. We don't need you here." And my son told him, "I don't understand. I'm giving my life to you, and this is the treatment that he's getting in return." As time went on, he turned around and wrote a letter home to me and his mom. The letter is on his Facebook page, Lance Corporal Greg Buckley on Facebook, and in that letter, it stated, "Dear Dad, thank you for everything you've done for me," and on, and "Mom, thank you and I love you with all my heart, and Shane and Justin, I want you to grow up to be good young men, and take care of yourselves, and take care of Mom and Dad." And it was a goodbye letter. As a father, to receive a goodbye letter from a son, your oldest son, who was only 20 years old at the time, is heart-wrenching. 2 weeks later, he called my phone, and I said, "Why would you write such a letter like that to me and your mom? I can't sleep at night thinking about you." He goes, "Because, Dad, you don't understand what's going on over here. They don't care about us. And they're going to turn around and murder me." He says, "I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here anymore." He says, "I am a Marine. I can't defend myself. I can't defend my brothers. We have to abide by their rules. We can't put our feet up on tables. We can't talk to anybody with our sunglasses on. We can't shake their hands. We can't talk about our families to them. We're a prisoner here. And our government is well aware of what's going on. and they choose to do nothing about this. My son became a Marine, and he volunteered to go over to Afghanistan. His friend, because Greg wasn't supposed to be there, his friend broke his ankle a month before, and there was an open slot. My son decided to step up to the plate and go over to Afghanistan to do the right thing. That's the way he was. But when he got there, he realized he was the wrong place to be. As heart-wrenching as it is to say, he told me, I just want to come home, Dad. I don't want to be here anymore. I can't do anything here. And I was on the side of my bed holding my phone as tight as I can, saying to myself, what can I do for my son? I can't get him. And he's just like, Dad, I want to come home. I want to come home. He said, I got to go. I'll talk to you later. I said, okay. And he called me. I knew he wasn't coming home till November. He winds up calling me, saying, I'm coming home, Dad, soon. I said, okay. Winds up, he calls me and he says, I'll be home in a month. I was taken back. It was in July. They were going to let him out early. He was over there training these Afghan soldiers and police to shoot, to work out, to get bigger, to get stronger. And my son at one time said to me, Dad, I'm training these people over here, but what's going to wind up happening is that they're going to murder us over here if I don't get out of here. So when he found out that he was going to be leaving, he was so happy because he felt in his heart that he was going to come home and be with his brothers and his mom and myself and his family and friends. That's all this kid wanted. Then on July 17th, he turned 21 years of age. I couldn't even talk to him on his birthday. But he called me 2 weeks after that and said, I'll be home in 10 days. And he called me again and said, Dad, this is so great. I can't wait to come home. I'm 21 now. I'll be able to come home and you and me can go to the bar and I can have a beer and I don't have to use fake ID. I had everything so planned for him when he came home. We were going to get together and just go away and go to South Beach, just me and him, and just have a great time. Because the kid was not just my son. That kid was my best friend. And I can't help but think every day of him saying to me on the phone, I just want to come home. I just want to come home. And I couldn't do that for him. And our government is not protecting these young boys over there. They're allowing them to be murdered. The truth of the matter here is, 2008, there was 2 insider attacks. Okay? Now, I think everybody can figure out the math here. As time went on, they increased. Because our president doesn't care about our soldiers. Those boys are everything to us. Without those soldiers, we have nothing. Our freedom is done. But these boys go over there willing to risk their lives. They didn't join the service to become school teachers, okay? They went over there to win a war against terrorists. But they're not allowing them to do that. They are being taught to train the terrorists. Each year as went on, 2009 it increased, 2010, 2011, my son was last year, 2012, there were 64 insider attacks. Green on blue they call it. They're not green on blue. These are terrorist attacks. My son, at 20 years of age, told me that he's training these guys that are going to turn around and murder him at the end of the day. Now, how does a 20-year-old boy know this, and our own government doesn't? Because our government doesn't care. And this is the problem. So as Americans, even though you're an attorney, or an accountant, school teacher, a nun, whatever you can be, but you're an American. You have the right to turn around, write a letter to Congress or to your senators or to the White House, as I do every single Monday, asking to turn around to help these young men. do the right thing by our soldiers, and those soldiers will do the right thing by us. You turn around, you disrespect these guys, you disrespect the veterans that are coming home wounded. You say there's not enough money to take care of these veterans. You know, it's ridiculous. Would you have enough money to go play golf with Tiger Woods for $10 million? No, let's be real about this. I'm not a hateful person. But when I show you love and compassion, I expect it in return. If you don't give me back what I'm giving you, then you're not going to get it anymore. And as far as I'm concerned, these other countries out there that burn our American flags, that my son died for, you're done, as far as I'm concerned. I'm sick and tired of watching the news and seeing these people burn our flags. And I'm not condemning all Muslims, by no means, but there's a lot of radical Muslims out there that need to be addressed and need to be taken care of. And when you're being bullied by people, what you do is you give them a good, swift kick in the ass. And they'll never bother you again. My son was in Afghanistan with people that hated him. And all my son could do is walk around every time he had a free moment and walk over to a little kid and hang out with them, as all his friends told me he did every night. He would walk around, and this was taken right before it all happened. This is a picture of my son with a little boy in Afghanistan that he would hang out and talk to and play with and kick the ball around with and try to teach him about basketball. This is what he did. He used to, in the morning, take paper cups and go outside in front of the base and fill up the cups with water and have them stick their fingers in it and brush their teeth. This is things that I was told about my son, what he did. He wasn't just a Marine. He was a good, good soul. He was a good person. A Naden, on August 10th, at about 8:30 at night, it was the worst time of my life. That morning he woke up, he did his basic training, trained them all day, taught them how to shoot, do the right thing, try to teach them to be soldiers, even though he knew that these people were going to kill him at the end, because he called his own death to me when he was 20. Now he's 21 years of age, trains the guys all day, goes into the base at night, sits there and talking to his friends and laughing, and one of the policemen walk over to his table and says to Greg and his friends that they're leaving in 2 days. Now, nobody knew that except for the Marines. How would an Afghan police officer know that my son was leaving in 2 days? They all looked at each other at the table, and they were like, why? How would this guy know this? As far as they're concerned, they're the enemy. They finished dinner, they went upstairs to their barracks, and they got changed. They turned around, went into the gymnasium, talking about going home in 2 days. And Greg turned around, had his headsets on, and working out with his friends. One of his friends were on the phone out on the barracks and said that the base cleared out. 30 Afghans that were on the base with 30 Marines. It should never have been like that. It should be 60 Marines, 30 Afghans. But that's not the way it is over there, because they have more control and more, more pull than we do. We have to abide by their rules and their regulations, even though we're over there training them. They turned around, cleared out the base, because one of Greg's friends were on the phone, and he realized there was no Afghans inside the base at that time. So as he's looking around the base, he hears pop, pop. He looks back towards the gym, he runs into the gym. At that time, while he's running towards the gym, he just heard this terrible yell and scream coming from the gym. A Naden, a 16-year-old boy, was given an AK-47 by the chief of the police in Afghanistan. This, a Naden, 6-year-old boy, was a T-boy to the chief of the police. For those who don't know what T-boy is, it's a slave. They see nothing wrong with this in Afghanistan. If you're a superior officer, as this gentleman was, not even a gentleman, this person was, you're allowed to have slaves. Now, I find that outrageous. You know, we're over there protecting this country over there, and they have slaves. They take these boys at 12 years of age, and they do things that I don't want to get into right now because the old lady's here, but it's disgusting. Okay? And it's more disgusting that the father of that child would allow the child to leave with one of these men. They turn around, they come into the house, and they say, "We want your son." They take the boy from the parents, and the parents are okay with that. The women have no say in the matter over there, where I find that disgusting also. Because you know what? Behind every good man is a good woman. Maybe that's why they're not good men. I have good women behind me. I have two beautiful sisters, Mary Liz and Sarah, that support me and help me in every way I can. You know, they do more for me than anybody else could. But as you listen to my story or go on my son's Facebook, you're going to find out that this young boy needs your help. As so does the boys over in Afghanistan. These young boys, 12 years old, they don't even know what's going on yet. Before they know it, they're sexual slaves. They're runners. They do things for these men that you can't even think about. They go out and get them drugs. They'll turn around and go buy them, get them a cup of coffee. They'll turn around and dance for them at nighttime. It's outrageous. It has to end. This boy was told by the chief of the police to take his AK-47, he handed it to him, because I found out, not our government, I found out, the serial number of the AK-47 belonged to the chief of the police. How outrageous is this? The chief of the police at this time should have been in his barracks, inside. It's a small, tiny compound. He was out, nowhere to be found. He nodded and walked into that facility by himself with an AK-47 and walked into that gym, opened up the netting, walked right in towards my son, and stood on top of my son like this. From what I understand, my son looked up, had his headsets on, looked up and seen the end of an AK-47 that's in his hand right there. The bullets are about 3 inches long. He stood on top of my son and fired a shot into my son's chest. For some reason, they said that my son moved somehow, and then he shot him again right here. He executed my son. My son didn't die in the battlefields. If he would have, I would accept this, and I would have to go on with my life. I have a hard time going on knowing that my son was executed the way he was. His best friend, Rivera, who he went there with to help, who's only 19, was shot right after Greg in the neck. And half of his neck was blown off. He lived for 2 hours, this young boy, 19 years old, screaming and crying and holding his neck. Paramedics, they came, they helped him, they got him to the hospital 2 hours later, but he died at the hospital. 19 years old. There's no remorse over there. Karzai never turned around once and apologized for any of these soldiers dying on insider attacks. Even though we're training them and helping them, we're also paying them. We pay their soldiers $260 a month. We, taxpayers, pay the Afghan soldiers. The superior officers get $340 a month. We pay for their clothing, their food, everything. If they turn around and they're a superior officer and they make up a name and they turn around and get a check for that kid, even though the kid might be only 6 years old, the chief of the police keeps the money. He puts it towards his house. It's happening, and our government knows it, and they're doing nothing about it. Now, it has to come to an end. And obviously has their own hidden agendas of what they're doing. I don't even want to get into it. But all I do know is our young men and women shouldn't be in Afghanistan. They have no business over there. The people are hating. We take our soldiers back home, we line them up on the borders, we put them in the airports, we put them wherever they can protect us. We save trillions of dollars every year, and with that money that we save, we can take care of our veterans that need our help, and our government doesn't want to admit that. They need our help, and we're not giving them the funding that they deserve. Our military should be paid more money than what they're being paid, so if you pay them more, of course more kids will join. If you disrespect the military, what's going to happen? If you're being disrespected, you're not going to join. Without a military, we have nothing. My son was proud to be a Marine. It made him very proud, and all I'm asking the American people here to turn around, step up, write letters, do whatever you can for me and my son and for all those others over there. Because if you start with Greg, then it would just go to the next and move on from there. There are haters out there, and if people hate you, you shouldn't protect them, you shouldn't take care of them. That's all I'm trying to ask you to do, is just to join my son's Facebook page, Lance Corporal Greg Buckley, and show the love and respect, as I think now he's up to 23,000 people that are on his Facebook page and that support him. I just want to end by just thanking everybody that's here today, and understand what I'm trying to say is that if everybody came together, we could make a huge change in this world. You're more powerful than what you think you are. You need to step up, and you need to make phone calls, and you need to write letters. It only takes 5 minutes to write a nice letter and send it somewhere. Send it to who you think can help us, and things will change. My son's name is all over the White House. Everybody knows who my son is because we speak out. But if we get more people to speak out, then there'll be more lives saved. In Afghanistan now, they told my son when he walked into base he wasn't allowed to carry his weapon with him. They stripped him of his weapon, so he was vulnerable to be murdered, where the Afghans were allowed to carry their weapons in the base at night. Now, to me, that's outrageous, but that's what the government decided, and that was supposedly a policy they couldn't change. Ever since this happened to my son, my sisters and myself have spoken out on CNN and NBC. They changed the policies there now. All the Marines are allowed to carry their weapons with them 24 hours. That's only from making phone calls, writing letters. It's a simple thing to do. If these boys are over there risking their lives for us, at least we can do is grab a pen, a piece of paper, and write a letter and send it out to whoever we think can help us. And after a while, they'll be so upset that they're not doing the right thing in Congress, they're going to wind up doing the right thing. Okay? They have to go to sleep at night too. But we all need to come together as one. That's all I'm asking. Doesn't matter race, religion, doesn't matter.
Thank you very much. We all honor your son's service, his sacrifice, yours and your families, and all of America's fallen and stricken soldiers. It is the ultimate sacrifice for freedom. Louder. Louder. My name is David Yerushalmi, and I'm putting on a different hat now. Earlier, I was friend and counsel to the Chabad House. Now I'm putting on my hat as legal counsel to Pamela Geller, Robert Spencer, the Freedom Defense Initiative, and many others in this battle space, as we call it. Before I introduce Pamela, I want to add something to Jeff's words regarding Rabbi Polikoff, who's here in the front row. It wasn't too long ago that I was invited to speak on the question of Sharia, the threat doctrine that derives from that, the threat to our freedom and our liberties. And I was given a form to speak on Shabbat, and then the following Sunday. Rabbi Polikoff sat to my immediate left during the discussions, and insofar as Rabbi Polikoff is a leader, and the rabbi of the Great Neck Synagogue, I can only echo what Jeff said. there is no shortage of leadership and courage in the Jewish community in Great Neck. It is manifest through the Men's Club of Great Neck Synagogue. It's manifest through the leadership of the Great Neck Synagogue. It's led by Rabbi Polakov. It's led by Rabbi Gazinski, Rebbetzin Gazinski here at the Chabad House. And it's led by all of you. Like many others, I have been involved in public policy and national security questions all my professional career. It wasn't until 9/11, 2001, that I had what oftentimes is referred to as an epiphany. I realized that the threat that we had imagined, the threat that we had thought, and I'm talking about the professional level, was one based upon real estate or political issues, turned out to be something different. The narrative that worldwide terrorism was a Palestinian cause and methodology to achieve political sovereignty in the Middle East turned out not to fit the facts. We had already experienced in the 1990s with the USS Cole, the various attacks on embassies that were not the product of a Palestinian or a Palestinian cause. But it took 9/11, the shock that we all as Americans felt, to wake up and understand that narratives are fine for fairy tales. But if you're going to confront an enemy, and if you're going to confront an enemy at a professional level, you better pay attention to the facts. So we looked around, and we began, each of us independently, searching for the connecting dots. I won't get into the substance of what Pamela Geller might speak about. We haven't even spoken about what she intends to talk about here. But having represented her across the United States in federal court, in the trademark office, in state courts, where either we're suing for her right to speak, for example, here in New York, when groups were running anti-Israel ads and blaming Israel and the United States and financial aid for all of the problems, Pamela decided to run with her partner Robert Spencer an ad that was quite simple, straightforward. In any war between a civilized man and a savage, support the civilized man. Stop jihad. Support Israel. Simple ad. Did not insult the people, did not insult the religion. Indeed, I dare say that the savages to whom she referred would probably agree that that's the description of their own behavior. The New York City MTA, having run the anti-Israel ads, refused to run her ads. The decision makers were individuals, lawyers, executives, many of them Jewish, but they simply said, we're not going to run the ad because it's disparaging. When Pamela Geller asked, well, is it not disparaging of Jews and Israelis that you blame violence on them and on America for financial aid? And the answer was, it's different. Because your speech might result in violence. Pamela Geller asked, I'm not violent. My friends aren't violent. Our speech is not violent, and it doesn't call for violence. So who's going to be violent? All of a sudden, the room is silent. We go into federal court in front of Judge Paul Engelmeyer, a new judge, a bright one, and he looked at the MTA after a full day of hearing and testimony and said, I don't get it. There's a First Amendment. You are censoring Ms. Geller's speech based upon its viewpoint and content, and in this country, that's illegal. but especially Pamela Geller, because she exercises her free speech courageously, civilly, but courageously, in venues and in contexts that would frighten the most courageous of men. One final little anecdote, and I'm going to turn it over to our guest speaker today. When a little Muslim girl in Ohio decided she wanted to leave Islam and exercise her right to freedom of religion, she was 17 years old when at least it was discovered. And her father discovered that she wanted to change her religion. He threatened to kill her in an honor kill. She left home, ran away to fellow prisoners in Florida, where she was sheltered for a while, until the parents found out, went to the authorities, went to court, and forced the Florida authorities to return her to Ohio. It was a custody battle, and throughout this process, Pamela Geller, at her website, atlasshrugs.com, wrote and covered the story. She pounded on the story that this little girl should not be sent to a home where she'll be murdered in an honor kill. As a result, the Ohio authorities agreed that she would remain in state custody, not be returned home, and when she turned 18 and emancipated, she left. As a result of Miss Geller's courageous reporting, and she was singular in covering this story to keep the spotlight on the authorities so this little girl wouldn't simply be shuttled back into a home to be murdered, which occurs daily, not only in other parts of the world, but right here in the United States. And you can see those events captured on Ms. Geller's website. Ms. Geller was sued. She was sued by one of the attorneys for the little girl, who happened to be associated with the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CARE. I hear some recognition of CARE. CARE is a Muslim Brotherhood Hamas front group. It's been identified as such by the United States government in federal criminal trials. It remains free to operate. It remains free to claim 501c3 status as a charitable organization. And it remains free to receive funds from overseas, you can imagine where, and to spend their money attacking our free speech and our liberty in the disguise of a civil rights organization. He sued Ms. Geller for $10 million. He had all the weight of the organization behind him. Pamela came to us, my partner and I, Robert Muse. We took on the case, and it took a year and a half. A year and a half. But eventually, the plaintiff caved in, dismissed the lawsuit. But that is the kind of assault that Ms. Geller is up against every single day. The protests here in Great Neck are nothing. In fact, I would suggest that the protest over her willingness to speak to us, and for us to be willing to listen to her here, are a good sign. We Jews especially love to speak. Anyone who's opened up a Talmud and engaged with the Chachamim, with our wise ones, knows that very few topics are off the table, as long as you speak respectfully and courteously. With that, I will invite Pamela Geller to address us.
I can speak. Alibi. First, I must take a moment to thank Rabbi Gajzinski, who, in the face of enormous pressure, you must see what this issue, how critical this issue is, how toxic this issue is. For one little Jew to speak to a men's club on a Sunday morning, such a firestorm. It's indicative of how bad things are. It's indicative of the war on free speech. And for me, it's an honor to be here at Chabad, because those of us who were involved in the fight, and I want to thank many of my esteemed colleagues that are here, Dr. Andrew Boston, Charles Jacobs, I want to thank Ashraf Ramallah, voice of the cops. Many of my esteemed colleagues are here. We know that Chabad is a touchstone in this war. Chabad is always a target by jihadists, always. I don't know if it's the beauty of Chabad, the goodness of Chabad, but that terrorist attack in Mumbai, that gruesome terrorist attack where 166 people were killed and all of the Muslims were released. They were all released, just like in Algeria, the hostage crisis last month. All 600 were released. The number one target was the Chabad house. And I will not, because we're in the Chabad, I will not discuss what was done to the rabbi and his wife, but it is beyond your imagination what went on in the Chabad house. And if you read, don't take my word for it, read the texts of the cell phone conversations they were having with headquarters in Pakistan. And of course, as you know, the ICR, the Pakistani spy agency, was involved. Now, to listen to Greg Buckley, to listen to the pain of a father, is the human cost of this fantasist delusion that we are pursuing all over the world, not just in Afghanistan, but in America. You tell me why his son didn't have a gun after Fort Hood. Yeah. Because Fort Hood was workplace violence, that's why. Here you had a jihadi, Major Nidal Hassan, who came out on grand rounds. His PowerPoint presentation is so powerful that if I had an AV, I would use it to show you and explain what the jihadic doctrine. He was wearing the garb of the Shaheed, the suicide, the martyr. He was giving out Qurans the morning of his jihad. He was screaming, Allahu Akbar, Allah is greater. Greater than what? Greater than your God. And it's workplace violence. So it's not just that they don't care. It's that they are pursuing a pro-jihadist foreign policy. Now people say, oh, you're really out there with that line, Geller. You're really out there. Well, pro-jihadist, that's too far. Really? So you tell me why in June, July, and August of 2009, when the only real freedom revolution was taking place in Iran, how did you know that? You didn't have to be a rocket scientist. It was led by women. And because they have been living under the boot since 1979. Was it perfect? It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And they are the head of the snake. And they are Hezbollah. And they're funding Hamas. And they're agitating in Bahrain. And they were killing our soldiers in Iraq. And they were funding the Taliban years ago. But that was the only freedom revolution Obama would not support. And they were holding signs, we're sorry for 1979. Obama, you're either with us or against us. Remember? He ignored it. But Mubarak, our ally for 30 years, the first Muslim country to make a peace with Israel, okay? He throws away with both hands. Throws away with both hands. And you can say, well, you know, it started out well. It never started out well. If you go to my site or Robert Spencer's site, we were saying in January of 2011, the Muslim Brotherhood is going to seize this moment. We have been documenting it for years. And it wasn't accidental because Obama invited the Muslim Brotherhood to his speech in Cairo in 2009 when they had been outlawed. Mubarak was livid. They had been outlawed and he invites them. And subsequent to that speech, his mid-level cabinet officials are meeting with the Muslim Brotherhood. That was no accident. Just so that you know. Well, we didn't know. It was freedom. It was an Islamic revolution. An Islamic supremacist revolution. And it's the same thing. Like, what are we doing in Libya? We don't get our oil from Libya. Let the French fight. What were we doing in Libya? Oh, he was a bad guy. Daddy was a bad guy. Yeah, he was a bad guy. There's worse. A jihadist revolution in Libya is worse. And you see, these things are not static, they're fluid. What happens? Mali gets taken over, becomes a terror state. They're falling like dominoes across the world. Catastrophic consequences. And the Jews, the most reviled of all in Islam. I mean, I have these flyers. I didn't put them out because I'm in a Chabad and I have respect. Even though I do not have respect for the Islamic texts and teachings that call for the annihilation of the Jews. I don't have respect for that. Don't ask me to respect that. I won't. Because what we saw here at the Great Next Synagogue was the sanction of the victim. I want you to think about what I just said. Evil is made possible, Ayn Rand said, by the sanction you give it. Withdraw your sanction. I am accused of being a hater and being a bigot and so on and so forth because that is the war that we are in. We are in the war in the information battle space. The war of ideas. And all the bullets and the bombs and the bloodshed comes as a result of what happens in this war. And part of the war is to destroy, and I mean destroy, anyone that speaks the truth. What is truth? Truth is the recognition of reality. Anyone that speaks the truth. It is the mission of Yehudim to speak the emes. It is our duty to speak the truth, no matter the cost. And anyone that speaks to this issue is demonized, marginalized, smeared, and rendered radioactive. You know, and what is that? That's the Sharia. You know, under the Sharia, there are blasphemy laws. You cannot criticize Islam. You cannot offend Islam. In Muslim countries, if you blaspheme, you're put to death. That's the penalty for blasphemy. Now, you can say, oh, well, you know, if you slander, even if it's true, it's considered slander under Islam. So in the West, you don't get assassinated, but they assassinate your character. They destroy your good name. They destroy your credibility. You can't make a living. They destroy people. Who wants to speak to this issue? Who will take this on? We must all stand up. I think the reason why the media became so in love with this story is because when it evolved from Habib Ahmed, the executive director of the Long Island, the Mosque of Long Island, Islamic Center of Long Island, and he used, as we know, his political office, Nassau County Human Rights Commissioner, to strong-arm the shul. And then, of course, liberal Jews, you know, Rabbi Davidson picked up on it. That's when the media frenzy really began. Jew against Jew. And they loved it. And, you know, because it is a war in the information battle space, and because the media is the enemy, I call them the enemy media, they are the largest weapon that our adversaries have in their arsenal. These ads that I do, okay, first of all, every single ad was a response to a libel, a fallacious smear, every single one. In the case of the Israel ad that David was talking about, there was one and I didn't respond. It wasn't until the second and the third one that I said, okay, this is off the charts. Now, again, this is the one that caused such a brouhaha. In any war between the civilized man and the savage, support the civilized man. Support Israel. Defeat jihad. Now, savage is an uncivilized person. And I submit to you that the war in Israel is a war on innocent civilians. You show me where it hasn't been. The rockets being fired from Gaza into schools, into towns, into homes. The slaughter of the Fowler family in the middle of the night, a 3-month-old baby beheaded. The blowing up of the bus in Bulgaria, Jewish women and children on holiday. You show me where the war against the Jews, the jihad against the Jews, has not been savage. Now, Rabbi Davidson says that my ad, I called all Muslims animals. I'm asking you a question. Is he bearing false witness or not? I don't spread hate. I expose hate. And we must talk about it. I don't have time to go into all the ad campaigns, but there is a war going on. It's covert. It is to disarm the American people, because if the American people, I don't worry about the fanaticism of the enemy. I worry about the confusion on our side. The Muslim Brotherhood group, the Hamas group CARE, Council of American Islamic Relations, who the media calls the Muslim civil rights group. I'm the hate group. I'm not one, I'm not two, I'm 5, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. And the ADL, who, by the way, yesterday criticized Israel, is outraged at Israel, because Israel told one of the Eurovision contestants not to wear Galliano. Now look, Galliano, you know, he's bad news. You never see Israel address any anti-Semitism, but when a guy is out there, you know, screaming into the cameras, I love Hitler, you know, that's what happened. But Foxman and ADL, they're outraged. Foxman and ADL, they're outraged at Joe Rivers and Seth MacFarlane. Okay? What are they doing? First of all, they shouldn't be the Anti-Defamation League. They should be the Defamation League. Every Jew that gives money today really should evaluate where your money is going and what are the results. You're all businessmen. You should be results-oriented in your philanthropy as well. Here we have the Council of American Islamic Relations, a Hamas group, so named not by Pamela Geller, by the U.S. government in the largest terrorist funding trial in our nation's history, the Holy Land Foundation trial, running ads, rebranding jihad. My jihad is to stay fit, despite my busy schedule. This is a serious campaign. So I said, okay, I instituted a campaign where I used 5 high-profile Muslims, their actual quotes, and I had to substantiate them. You know, in Washington said, "Oh, we don't believe this. We want to see substantiation." You have the Prime Minister of Turkey, who said the mosques are our fortresses, the minarets are our bayonets, and the Muslims are our soldiers. Okay, and we have, of course, this is from Hamas MTV. Killing Jews is worship that draws us close to Allah. What's interesting about this campaign, I have 6 ads, and only this one got publicity. And this ad campaign, where I'm showing actual quotes, there's Osama. He said, the first thing that we are calling you is to Islam. This is what they said. You know, here's Sheikh Qaradawi, the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood across the world. The punishment of homosexuality is a death penalty. Now, why did I do that one? Because San Francisco, the mecca of the homosexual community, the city council actually had a press conference and condemned me and the ads, and then issued a resolution, the first of its kind. So I said, okay, but will you condemn what they're saying in the ad? No. And who found that out but a blogger? Media never asked them. The media never asked them. And even crazier, gets crazy. I'm telling you, we're living in an Orwellian age. The leader of the Human Rights Council in San Francisco, transgender, said, this is true, said, well, you know, it's easier to get a transgender operation in Iran. Because one of my homosexual ads has, Ahmadinejad saying we have no homosexuals in Iran. And the reason why they have no homosexuals in Iran is because they make them get transgender operations. This is the disconnect. But you see how pervasive? You see how pervasive it is? You see how I'm described? Immediately always described as anti-Muslim. I'm not anti-Muslim. I'm anti-Jihad. And I'm anti-Sharia. And they're implying that all Muslims support these acts of jihad. They're implying that all Muslims support Sharia. They're implying that by calling me that. They say, well, you know, not every Muslim, is a jihadist. I said, of course not. But I don't have to pat on the back every Muslim that doesn't want to kill me. That's my bar. Now you see, in Afghanistan, these green on blue attacks have escalated with the sanction of the Taliban. You see that Obama has pressed Karzai to make a political deal with the Taliban while they are poisoning the children in the schools, the girls' schools, while they're slaughtering our soldiers. I mean, talk about sitting ducks. I don't know how when your son was over there, how you could even cope with what was going on and the policy that was going on, and knowing that your son was just in the middle of it. You know, and by the way, the military sends out a memo that says we have to watch domestic hate groups. And Atlas Shrugs is in there. You're laughing. In this long list, Christian groups, you guys see this list? Yep. Not one jihad group. Not one. You've got to wake up. You've got to wake up. You have to listen to me. Don't burn the Quran. Read the Quran. It's all in there. The problem is there is a jihadic doctrine that calls for slay the unbelievers wherever you may find them. And it's not just that. It is myriad texts and quotes. It is a commandment. It is not like the Bible. It is not like in Judaism where, if there's two Jews in the room, there are three opinions. Question. You are not allowed to question. Under Islam, if you attempt to reform, or reinterpret the word of Allah, it was the word of Allah. It's not like the Bible that was written by men. Yes, it's God's word, but written by men. No, this is the word of Allah is given to Muhammad. If you attempt to reinterpret it, you are guilty of hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is punishable by death. Apostasy is punishable by death. What worries me is that the media in this country and the culture is self-enforcing the Sharia. You cannot criticize Islam. You cannot offend Islam. This is what they're doing. So we can't even have this discussion. Look what it took to get this. Think for a second of the brouhaha, the firestorm, the pressure that the rabbi came under in Great Neck. Look, that rabbi was very strong. I'm going to tell you, I've been canceled in the best places. It is overwhelming. This is not a partisan issue. It has become a partisan issue. But it is not. It is a life and death issue. It is a civilizational issue. We have to have a civilizational spine. The Jews, it is unforgivable what the American diaspora is doing. Our brothers in Europe are being wiped out. Norway will be Judenrein in a couple of weeks. The last 819 Jews are out of there. Malmo, Denmark, France, 100,000 are fleeing France. What is being accomplished today is exactly what Hitler attempted to accomplish. And it is Islamic anti-Semitism. It is in the Quran. We have to talk about it. We need our interfaith partners, our interfaith partners that are always silencing our rabbis, to speak, to call for expunging the Quran of the violent texts that inspire jihad. That's what we have to do. problem is so big, I can't solve it. You know, I can't get my arms around it. You know, it's like a doctor when there's an epidemic and he's like, I can't cure everybody. Of course not. You can't cure everybody. But you have a sphere of influence. You treat who you can treat. Every single one of you have lives. In this room, there may very well be 1 million people. Meaning, you have friends. Now, I know there are people that are not going to want to talk about it. We all know those dogmatic, mentally ill. Okay? Yeah. You say A is A. They're like, no, not necessarily. No, A is A. No, you're wrong about that. That's because you're a racist, Islamophobic, anti-Muslim bigot. That's why. You have a sphere of influence. You need to speak. You need to speak at every turn. You know during the course of your day you hear things that you let go. Do not let them go. Do not let them go. First, learn everything. There are scholars here in the audience. Robert Spencer, Doug Hykins, who's been just an amazing, a giant. Anybody that stands up to this issue is a giant. It's withering. It's withering. Believe me, you would not want to be me. No. Trust me on this. It's unbelievable. But I know that I'm right. And I know that we are righteous. And I know that we're doing the right thing. And I applaud you for coming. And I beg that you support the rabbi because this man is singular. I mean, he's singular. He's and I ask that you talk, speak, in capital letters with an exclamation point. Speak, because together, united, we will win. We are right, and we are righteous. And remember, withdraw your sanction. Free speech demo. Free speech demo. Very briefly. Free speech demo at 1 o'clock, 240 Old Country Road, in front of the Nassau County Human Rights Commission, where Habib Ahmed's office is, because Habib Ahmed used his political office to strong arm the shul to crush free speech. I know you're busy. I know that you have other things to do, but I implore you, anyone that could be there. You know, you make out your wills, you make out your estate, you think, boy, you know, I've taken care of my children. You have not taken care of your children. You are leaving your children to a world that is unthinkable. Because just as we love our grandparents for saving us from the greatest scourge, the greatest evil, our children, our grandchildren are going to hate us. They're going to hate us. They will despise us for leaving them held hostage to nuclear Islamic regimes. Believe me on this. You don't need to be a soothsayer to see what's coming. So 240 Old Country Road, 1 o'clock, just on your way to lunch. I know you're planning that. On your way to lunch, stop by, just give us a holler. We'll be there with flags, no controversial signs, unless you know, hate speech, you know, the truth is new hate speech. And so truth is controversial. Well, you gotta stand up. You gotta stand up.
Now, we have, as been mentioned,
God bless you, ma'am.
God bless you.
Microphone.
I'm going to be very brief, but I'm delighted to be here, and it's quite amazing. Just a couple of weeks ago, I and many others were involved in the Brooklyn College situation with BDS, a group filled with hate towards Israel, a group that is hateful, a group that is interested in undermining the well-being of the people of Israel. You know, the people of Israel, we're the bad guys. Little old Israel trying to survive in that neck of the woods, which has become a more dangerous place. And I remember so distinctly, and by the way, my position in terms of BDS being at Brooklyn College, I was the liberal in that particular story. Because my position was, look, they were right to speak. I'll be out there as I was to present my point of view, but they have a right to speak. That's the position that I took. And I remember all of the excuse me, you know, we can't live with them and we can't live without them. The media. The media was there, editorials in the New York Times, that they have a right to speak, they have a right to make their point of view. By the way, my position was that the university itself, Brooklyn College, was a co-sponsor of that hateful event. And that was the issue that I presented along with a lot of other elected officials. And I find it remarkable, not shocking, because look, I've been around long enough to know the sheker, the lies, that there isn't really justice when it comes to Israel or to our point of view. But I didn't, again, not to criticize any public officials, God forbid, but I don't know how many public officials spoke out about the right of Pam Geller to speak here in the community at the synagogue, at the other synagogue. How many lined up to speak? To say this is outrageous. To say I disagree with Pam Geller, but she has a right to speak. By the way, did you notice how dangerous this lady is? I mean, are you scared? I mean, are you gonna go onto the covers when you get home? Are you gonna tell people that you came to listen to Pam Geller and oh my God, I can't repeat what she said? I mean, it's like, it's nuts. It's truth turned upside down. I mean, Pam Geller is talking about an issue that is absolutely critical. It's not about Muslims. It's not about, you know, there are bad apples in every barrel, in every community. There are people in the Jewish community who betray the Jewish community on a regular basis, ladies and gentlemen. So, I am, I'm here to say, to be here, to be part of this, because, let me tell you the most important thing. You cannot be afraid. And I want to thank the rabbi of Chabad. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. That's what the Rebbe was all about. It was not about being politically correct. It was about doing the right thing in the eyes of Hashem. And that's what Lubavitch is. You cannot be afraid. You've got to stand up. You've got to speak out. It's a dangerous world out there. You know, over the past couple of years, we have been lucky by the grace of Hashem and the authorities in America, thank God, the FBI and so on. How many people have been arrested over the past 5 years in America, prepared to murder thousands of Americans? Whether it is in Manhattan, at the train stations, on 14th Street. How many people blowing up synagogues in Manhattan? Almost every situation, those that were involved happen to be Muslims, but that's not the issue. They are radical Muslims. They believe. See, they don't believe when they blow up something that they are terrorists, you see? They're not terrorists. They are freedom fighters. That's what they are. When terrible things happen in the Middle East, buses are blown up, men, women, and children. You murder little children. It's not terrorism. It's freedom fighters. You're fighting for your freedom, and anything goes. That is not the truth. Not in a civilized society. Doesn't work that way. And being politically correct, I know a little bit about that. I've spent all my life looking at things and trying to be straightforward about them. You can't be afraid. There's a real threat out there. We've been lucky that those bombs did not go off. The car in Times Square that was loaded with explosives. We were lucky. We were lucky that the bomb didn't go off. How many hundreds and hundreds of Americans would have died? Men, women, and children. And you've got people out there, is there any doubt in your mind that there are people out there in that community who want to kill Americans for the cause? Because it is a great mitzvah, it is the ultimate good deed to kill Americans. We can't even fathom that. You and I cannot understand such a thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, I'm just thrilled when Chabad took that step. I wasn't surprised, but the message is, you gotta stand up and not be afraid and do whatever you can. As Pam said, and this is so true in life, it isn't about solving the problem. There are problems out there when you look at it and you say, oh God, where am I going to start? You know, when I was involved in the Soviet Jewry movement, people used to say, through JDL, people used to say, you're going to make a difference? You think you're going out in the streets is going to make a difference? You're dealing with the Soviet Union, the greatest power in the world next to the United States. Or many other things that we try to do. We sometimes look at the odds and we say it's a lost cause. I don't even want to say anything. I'm going to be looked upon in a strange way. So ladies and gentlemen, the way it works is all you are required to do is to do your part. You don't have to worry about solving the problem. You leave that in the hands of God. But you need to take the first step. You can't say, God, where are you, when you're doing nothing, when you're not involved in some way. So again, I have always been a great fan of Lubavitch, always visited with the Rebbe. I, as a political leader and a leader of the community, I just want to tell you, I miss him desperately, because he was the great of the generation. I wish he was around, because I need to talk to him. So, thank you very much for stepping forward, and I thank everyone in the greater community for not being afraid to come up and stand up and listen to somebody. That's what America is all about.
Thank you all very much.